When the Germans took over Norway after their invasion launched in April 1940, there was a Norwegian collaborationist movement, the Nasjonal Samling, led by Vidkun Quisling. The name of this leader became a synonym for traitor. Who was he and where did his party stand for? That and more in this Factions episode. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, my name is Stefan, I'm a Dutch history teacher and I make videos about history for you. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Let's start. Fascism was on the rise in many European countries during the interwar period. Norway was no exception. They had their own fascist party named the Nasjonal Samling, which means National Rally. They called their leader the Führer, and they had their own uniforms, flag and eagle mark. This party was founded in 1933 by former Minister Vidkun Quisling. In the elections of that year they gained around 2% of the votes, which was more than the communists, but not a whole lot. This showing didn't increase in the following year. Right before the outbreak of World War II, the NS had between 5,000 and 6,000 active members. Let's take a look at the ideology of the NS and to what extent it differed from German Nazism. Before the National Samling was founded, several minor proto-fascist movements had appeared in interwar Norway, being influenced by either Italian fascism, such as the Fatherland League and the National Legion, or German Nazism, such as the National Socialist Workers' Party of Norway. The NS itself was officially established in Norway as a successor to a small anti-socialist organization called Nordic People's Uprising. Party founder and former Minister of Defense Vidkun Quisling was, from the beginning in 1933 to the end in 1945, the most prominent person in the NS. He was proclaimed as unconditional Führer, leader of the NS, the party adhering to a leadership principle that also characterized Hitler's and Mussolini's leadership. The party was, from the beginning, highly heterogeneous, with conservative and more radical members, Christians and followers of neo-pagan religions, traditional Norwegian nationalists, and members more influenced by Italian fascism and German Nazism. Opinions differed massively, but there was a basic level of agreement about the party's ideology, predetermined by Quisling: anti-socialism, anti-parliamentarism, and a vague desire for radical political change in Norway. One could differentiate between two antagonistic camps within the NS: the totalitarian, radical, anti-Semitic, Nazi-inspired strand, and the dominant authoritarian strand around Quisling and Deputy Chairman Johan B. Hjocht, is rooted in nationalism and Christian values. However, many members were influenced by the German race researcher Hans F.K. Günther and his idea of Nordischer Gedanke, Nordic idea, which insisted on the superiority of the Nordic Aryan race. This belief, based on the Volkist ideology, included strongly anti-Semitic attitudes. In the first year of its existence, two ideas dominated the party's ideology. First, the NS explicitly had a sense of crisis and its solution through national rebirth. Both the yearning for national rebirth and the sense of crisis are nowadays defined as fascist characteristics. The spiritual crisis of the Norwegian nation had to be overcome by national unity and leadership of Vidkun Quisling. Second, the NS refused to affiliate itself directly with Italian fascism and German Nazism, even though a certain kinship was admitted. It was probably no coincidence that the National Samling was established a few months after Hitler's seizure of power in Germany, even though domestic Norwegian dynamics had led to its formation. Tellingly, the abbreviation NS in Germany, referring to National Socialismus, was suspicious. Large parts of the Norwegian press therefore assumed that Quisling's movement was fascist or national socialistic. However, Quisling and his party followers didn't use both fascism and Nazism as a term to describe themselves, as Quisling made clear in a public speech in August 1933. We are not trying to adapt any foreign doctrine here in this country. We seek to solve the issue based on the Nordic conditions and to accommodate things in Norwegian purposes. We neither want fascism nor National Socialism. The NS Party Journal mentioned Italy and Germany occasionally, but an article called "The Ideological Base of Our Movement" raised the question of how fascism and Nazism were related to the party. The article emphasized the NS's Norwegian spiritual and national eigenart, idiosyncrasy, distinctiveness, which for party spokesman Eivind Mæhle constituted the reason for the ideological independence from other kindred movements. Therefore, it is clear that we can never rely on fascism or National Socialism, which emerged from Italian and German national conditions. But we can learn practical lessons from the struggles of these movements. The statement sums up the party's general position. The NS refused to label itself as fascist or National Socialist, but admitted a certain kinship to the movements in Italy and Germany. The explanation for this is simple. The term Nazi was used pejoratively to discredit political opponents, especially in a country with a liberal tradition such as Norway. However, other movements in similar countries used to self-descriptions Nazi and fascist, such as Frits Clausen's National Socialist Workers' Party of Denmark, the DNSAP, and the Swedish National Socialist Party, the SNSP, both labeling themselves as Nazi. In Britain, there was the British Union of Fascists and the Imperial Fascist League. In Norway, the unsuccessful cases of the National Legion, Fascist, and NNSAP, Nazi, had shown that there was nothing to gain from calling oneself fascist or Nazi, an experience that clearly affected the NS. In addition, the party had, at least in the way it presented itself and its own news coverage, a self-conception of being an independent national phenomenon. Quisling supported this idea of national independence, initially being neither pro-Italian nor pro-German, but pro-British. He dreamt of combining Italian fascism and German National Socialism into his own political synthesis, expressed by the ideology of the NS. The focus on Norwegian independence from other European fascist movements was illustrated by the party's emphasis on Norwegian, mostly medieval history and traditions. This was represented by the NS party symbol, the Olaf Korset, a sun cross based on the national saint Olaf. The obvious alternative would have been the swastika, which the DNSAP in Denmark and the SNSP in Sweden had gladly copied from the German role model. A similar example was the use of the Old Norse greeting Heil og Zel, healthy and happy, as the NS's form of salutation, including the raising of the right hand. The salutation remained Norwegian, but the style was clearly inspired by the fascist Roman salute and the Nazi salutation Heil Hitler.
Die Besetzung der wichtigsten Hafenplätze an der langen norwegischen Küste war ein gewagtes, schwieriges Unternehmen. Zum ersten Mal in der Kriegsgeschichte wird das Flugzeug zum Transport größerer Verbände eingesetzt. Der wichtige Platz Stavanger wird zum Beispiel nur von der Luft aus besetzt. 10.000 Mann werden in den ersten Tagen durch die Luft nach Norwegen gebracht. Die gelandete Infanterie sammelt sich rasch und marschiert nach Oslo.
On April 9th, 1940, the German army invaded Denmark and Norway. The Norwegian army was badly trained and equipped and had to fall back. Allied support that landed at Narvik was only able to prolong the inevitable. The remaining Norwegian forces signed a capitulation treaty with the Germans on June 10th. Norway was now taken over by the Germans. Hitler appointed Josef Terboven as Reichskommissar. In September, all political parties were banned except the NS. Members of this party became commissary ministers, and in 1942 Quisling was made head of the Collaborationist government. Quisling proved more than willing to promote and facilitate the recruitment of Norwegians into Germany's armed forces. The Norwegian fascist leader undoubtedly wanted Germany to win the war, and he was a firm believer in the idea of Nordic Germanic racial unification. However, like most other collaborators in Nazi-occupied Europe, Quisling and his party also pursued their own nationalistic aims and power political interests. The NS administration had a degree of autonomy in purely civilian matters, but was in reality controlled by Reichskommissar Terboven as head of state, who was subordinate only to Adolf Hitler. Quisling saw a National Socialist Norway as the core element of a Nordic community of Scandinavian nations who would confederate with a Germanic Europe whose head would be Hitler. Military recruitment could also boost popular support of Quisling's party, since his party remained small even after the German takeover and had to increase in size in order to rule the whole country if the Germans ever decided to restore Norwegian independence. Military collaboration was also rooted in the party's ideology. Prior to Operation Barbarossa, in January 1941, a campaign was launched to recruit volunteers for SS Regiment Nordland. At the end of that month, a group of around 200 volunteers were sworn in by Himmler himself at a ceremony in Oslo. Later, several hundreds more were enrolled. Most Norwegians were recruited after the Axis invasion of the Soviet Union had started. On June 29th, the Norwegian Legion was proclaimed on the radio by Reichskommissar Terboven. The major propaganda slogan came down to "Free Finland." Because neighboring Finland was attacked by the Soviets in 1939, the Nordic races had to come to its aid and save the Nordic lands and the whole of Europe from the Red Peril. Eventually, the Norwegian Legion was sent to the Leningrad front. During the entire period, the unit was plagued by disillusionment, which led to desertion and self-mutilations. In May 1943, the unit was officially dissolved. Around 1,900 Norwegians had served in the Legion and around 180 men were killed. Also, 400 Norwegian nurses served at the front, of which 20 were killed in action or missed in action. Norway was under German rule till the end of World War II. Quisling faced trial and was executed for treason in October 1945. If you want to learn more about the Dutch fascist party, the NSB, click here and click here to learn about the Norwegian Waffen-SS volunteers.